In a remote, wind-swept town perched at the edge of the Scottish Highlands, there was a stone chapel that had been abandoned for over a century. Its walls were crumbling, its bell long silenced, and its pews left to decay under a heavy layer of dust. The villagers called it the Vale's Hollow, warning strangers never to step inside. They spoke in hushed tones of an ancient evil that lingered there, bound but restless, waiting for someone foolish enough to awaken it. 4 years, these warnings had been enough to keep the curious away. Until Jonah arrived. Jonah was a historian, or at least that's what he claimed. In truth, he was a thrill-seeker, always chasing the forbidden and the forgotten. When he first heard the stories of the Vale's Hollow, he dismissed them as superstition. A demon trapped in the ruins of an old chapel? It was exactly the kind of myth he loved to debunk. Armed with a journal, a lantern, and a digital recorder, Jonah set out one cold October evening, determined to uncover the truth. The path to the chapel was overgrown and treacherous, winding through a dense forest that seemed unnaturally silent. As Jonah approached, he noticed the air grew colder, heavier, as though the chapel itself was exhaling an invisible frost. The structure loomed in the moonlight, its broken steeple stabbing into the starless sky. Carvings of grotesque faces adorned the stonework, their expressions twisted in agony. Jonah couldn't help but shiver as he pushed open the heavy wooden doors, the creak echoing unnaturally in the stillness. Inside, the air was damp and foul, reeking of mildew and something metallic, blood, perhaps, though the source was unclear. His lantern illuminated faded murals on the walls, depicting scenes of torment. Figures writhing in flames, shadowy beasts with clawed hands dragging screaming souls into darkness. In the center of the chapel stood an altar, cracked and stained with something dark and ancient. Above it hung a peculiar relic, a chain of black iron, its links as thick as a man's wrist, glowing faintly with a sickly green hue. Jonah's curiosity overtook his caution. He approached the altar, running his fingers over the carvings etched into its surface. They were unlike any language he'd ever seen. Jagged, angular, and almost alive, the symbols seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of his eye. As he leaned closer, he noticed something strange. The faint sound of whispers, growing louder the longer he lingered. The chain above him began to rattle softly, though there was no wind. Jonah instinctively stepped back, but his foot caught on a loose stone, sending him crashing against the altar. The impact was enough to dislodge the chain, which fell to the floor with a deafening clang. At that moment, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar. The air seemed to vibrate, and the ground beneath him quaked. Jonah scrambled to his feet as a blinding green light poured from the shattered chain. From the light emerged a figure that defied logic, its form constantly shifting. It was tall, impossibly so, with limbs that stretched and bent unnaturally. Its eyes burned like twin suns, their gaze piercing and cruel. Its voice was not one, but many, layered and cacophonous, speaking in a language that Jonah's mind could barely comprehend. The demon had been freed. "You dare disturb my slumber?" the creature hissed, its voice reverberating through the chapel. Jonah couldn't speak, his mouth dry and his body frozen in terror. The demon stepped forward, its movements fluid yet unervingly abrupt. "For centuries, I have waited," it continued, its tone shifting from rage to something almost amused. "You have given me the key to my freedom. For that, I grant you a reward, knowledge of despair." Jonah's mind was flooded with visions, endless darkness, worlds consumed by fire, and countless faces screaming in agony. He saw the demon's true form, a mass of writhing, inhuman shapes, each more horrifying than the last. His sanity fractured under the weight of the images, but he was still conscious, still aware of the entity towering over him. "You are but a vessel now," the demon said, extending a clawed hand toward Jonah. "Through you, I will walk this world once more." Jonah's body convulsed as the demon's essence poured into him, filling every cell with an unbearable heat. He screamed, the sound echoing through the chapel and into the empty forest beyond. When the villagers found Jonah days later, he was standing in the chapel's doorway, his eyes glowing with the same sickly green light as the chain. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and he spoke in a voice that was not his own. "He is coming," Jonah said, his lips curling into a grotesque smile. "And nothing will stop him." That night, the village was consumed. A great fire erupted from the forest, spreading with unnatural speed and precision, leaving nothing but ash in its wake. The Vale's Hollow was destroyed, but the demon was far from contained. Jonah, or whatever he had become, was last seen walking toward the horizon, his shadow stretching impossibly long under a sky that no longer held stars. The legend of the Vale's Hollow lived on, but it was no longer a warning of a place to avoid. It became a story of a mistake, a key turned in the wrong lock, and a demon unleashed upon the world. Those who tell the tale often whisper a chilling truth. If you listen closely on a still night, you can still hear the faint rattling of chains, a reminder that some doors should never be opened.